We think of political persecution, political targeting, the suppression of rights and of free speech as something that happens to us, to conservatives, to Republicans, to the right. But there's a very interesting case I want to discuss which shows that once you begin to give regimes this kind of power, their violations of liberties become undiscriminating over time. In other words, they start with a set of targets, and then they decide to persecute just about anyone. They persecute anyone that they see as a threat to themselves, even if the threat is coming kind of from their own political aisle. And George Orwell talks about this, in which the communists begin by trying to go after people that they see as anti-communist or bourgeois. But pretty soon they're persecuting socialists and other deviant brands of communism, so that the political weapons are wielded in a kind of promiscuous way. Now, I saw this because of a post by the Justice Department. They said that U.S. citizens and Russian intelligence officers are charged with conspiring to use U.S. citizens as illegal agents of the Russian government. And I'm like, wow, this seems a kind of strange echo of Russiagate and Russia collusion. The Russians are somehow manipulating Americans. And I was expecting to read about the Proud Boys or some militia group that the Russians are supposedly trying to get into. Turns out, no. The people arrested are, there's a Russian guy who supposedly is the Russian agent, and there are 4 black American leftists, 4 socialists, who are charged with being, quote, agents of Russia. So this piqued my curiosity. I was like, what have these people actually done? Well, it turns out that they've done essentially nothing. The leader of this group is a black guy named Omali Yeshitela, and this guy has conducted rallies denouncing the Ukraine war, denouncing U.S. involvement in Ukraine, calling for a peace treaty that would bring an end to the war. And this, as I listened to the guy talk, it's a little over the top. It's a little bit incendiary, but it's essentially socialist rhetoric. And socialist rhetoric, let's remember, has this kind of anti-war dimension. It sees war as a kind of mechanism that capitalist societies use to divert attention away from the plight of the working class. So there's nothing really all that unfamiliar. And anyone who knows the rhetoric of the 60s, this is the rhetoric of the 60s all over again. These same guys, these 4 black socialists, are also accused of posting memes and blogs and other political content protesting against the war in Ukraine, a war that, by the way, they see through a lens of racial injustice. Now, the first thing to be noted is that the United States itself does a lot of this all over the world. In other words, if the Russians are accused of somehow encouraging or supporting marginal groups on the right and or the left to push, let's end the war in Ukraine, let's oppose the Biden administration, if the Russians are doing that, the United States government does that frequently, using vehicles like the National Endowment for Democracy. The United States posts false information, disinformation, certainly shares information that's sympathetic to the U.S.'s own official position, and tries to get local groups in those countries to circulate this. So if this is a crime, we're doing it. And we're doing it on an international scale and on a far bigger scale than one Russian guy, I forget his name, it's in here, Alexander, then one Alexander Viktorovich, who is in cahoots with 4 black radicals. So that's the first point. The U.S. government does this all the time. And yet the articles that are talking about these arrests never mention this. They talk about something that's going on. They act as if it's extremely chilling. And they, in fact, they typically, these news articles and reports treat allegations as fact. Here is an actual exchange. Jim, this shows how active Russia is in our democracy. The reporter goes, "Indeed." So, and then goes on to read from the indictment. So it's as if the indictment has already been proven, case closed. This Russian guy is accused, so he must have done it. The African socialists are accused of collaborating with him, so they must have done it. Now, what does collaboration here actually mean? These guys don't work for Russia, even though the indictment seems to say that they were, quote, Russian agents, or that they were that they were activated by the Russians. The simple truth is nothing more. The word that's used in the indictment is that this guy, Alexander Viktorovich Ionov, quote, directed these fringe groups. Well, how did he direct them? These guys never saw themselves as agents of Russia. They took positions that they already believed. It may be that the Russians were like, let's have a rally, we'll help to pay for it. And my point about all this is big deal. It doesn't really matter. Let's say, for example, that a Russian organization is trying to encourage me to say certain things on this podcast. In fact, there's no such organization. I say what I actually think. But my point is, if there were, so what? I can still say whatever I want. I still have a First Amendment right that is in no way canceled out. Well, Dinesh, it's Russian propaganda. So what? It doesn't really, oh, Dinesh, it's disinformation. So what? Our rights are not canceled by the fact that they are, quote, directed or stimulated or encouraged or cheered. I see so many times in the press, oh, Tucker Carlson's statement on Ukraine has been reproduced, has been quoted in Russian media. So what? Tucker Carlson is saying what he exactly thinks. He's defending the interests of the United States as he sees them. If the Russians happen to agree with the point he makes, again, that in no way undermines its validity, in no way proves that it's untrue. But I think the broader point I want to make here is that the left needs to be a little bit careful in cheering the FBI, cheering the CIA, cheering these organs, these police state organs of government. These police state organs of government don't care about right or left. At the end, they care about themselves. They care about their own power. In the end, tyranny is an undiscriminating monster that will devour us all.